Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Hello, sneakers. So, are you ready for Christmas? My daughter came over yesterday to inform me that there are supply chain issues in the world, so I needed to do my shopping now just to make sure everything arrives on time. And she had some suggestions about that too. But anyway, I did it. So assuming that UPS does its duty, I can just relax now and enjoy the season. I put up a modest 3 Christmas trees this year. Of course, the annual Star Trek tree, the superhero tree, and the main tree, which my cat Bustifer thinks is the cat tree because clearly I brought it in just so he could try and bring it down. And because the tree is blocking the doors, I can't keep pets out of the broadcast booth today. So if you hear animal sounds, that just means this is a really authentic holiday jam podcast. Jesse, you ready for Christmas?
Listen, as a Jewish person who grew up in Oklahoma, I feel like I'm always experiencing Christmas. So,
but Hanukkah's over, right?
That's true. Hanukkah's over, and so now I just get to enjoy my presents like a month earlier than everybody else. So, and I'm still just annoyed that I'm pretty sure I heard a Christmas song in October at like a CVS, and that is too early. So,
first time I did a Christmas book, Midnight Before Christmas, it came out in October. And I thought, what? And you couldn't get it because it had sold through, not sold out, unfortunately, but sold through so by the time people were interested, like bookstores couldn't get it, but whatever. I have to mention that I am also, in just a few days, celebrating an anniversary. The 13th of December will be the 30th anniversary of the publication of my first ever novel, Primary Justice. I suppose I could date it from the first time I signed a contract, but I don't really remember when that was. So instead, I'm using December 13th to be my 30th anniversary day, which is only important because, 30 years and 57 books later, I'm still going. I think we should have some kind of December 13th celebration, don't you, Jesse?
I do. I also think you should publish 3 books very quickly so we can get a clean 60.
And then at least we could say 2 books a year.
Right? Otherwise, yeah, because I was like, wait, how's that math work out?
Yeah, it means, 2 books a year, except when I'm completely slacking or doing something. Hey, this is, as promised, our very special Holiday Jam episode, and I have 4, yes, you heard me right, 4 guests representing 4 of the 5 novellas, meaning kind of longish stories, in our new Christmas anthology, Christmas Tapestry. If you're wondering why I have 4 stories out of the 5th represented, who's the 5th author? That would be me. Each of the authors here has contributed a tale using the series characters or series worlds in their novels. Just to be clear, that is Betsey Kulakowski, Tamra Grantham, Kenneth Andrus, John Wooley, and we are going to talk to every single one of them because they are all experienced, multi-published writers with a lot of great tips and advice to offer. But first, the news. It's one of those things people always say about publishing that is actually true, that things tend to slow down during the holiday season because people are doing other things, which is understandable. But 2 stories I wanted to mention first. An investor group has bought Open Road Media, which once upon a time was part of Grove Atlantic, but now it's going to this investor group that has a lot of, I guess, big name investors. I didn't know them. In case you don't know, Open Road was one of the pioneers in acquiring digital rights. Like soon after ebooks started to be of interest, Open Roads started seeing the future and gobbling up a lot of good ones. In fact, here's my, personal thing that I can add to the story, that they've got a lot of mine. And the reason is because after ebooks started to become a real issue post 2009, Some of us, like me, had 10, 12. I had a bunch of books that were published before ebooks even existed, so the contracts didn't cover ebook rights. So the nameless Big Five publisher, well, they have a name, I'm just not going to say it, opined that meant they had the rights. I had a differing opinion, and we argued about it for a while, but I eventually got them and sold them to Open Road. This was a while back. If this were happening today, I would have just kept them and handled that myself, but that was a whole different world. And to be fair, Open Road has done a very good job with those and sold a lot of ebooks for me and a lot of other people, which is why this is a noteworthy story to me anyway, because instead of being bought by another publishing house, they're being bought by an investor group. Kind of like you may remember not that long ago, Barnes and Noble was bought by a hedge fund. I mean, people keep pontificating about the future of publishing. I don't know, Jesse, is the future of publishing going to be controlled by Amazon or corporations or Wall Street?
The story. I don't know who to root for in the story.
Yeah.
Because I know hedge funds keep buying newspapers, local newspapers, and whatnot. As long as there's competition, I'm happy with it, because that means there's one more group that has another reason to try something different. So, rich people, spend your money, buy as many publishers as you want.
I suppose it's better than going out of business, and I don't think any corporate entities were interested in, say, picking up Barnes and Noble. But this is kind of a strange. I suppose we should just be glad that people with money think there's enough future in books that it matters. But
Yeah.
Of course, this is primarily digital rights. Okay, second story. Written Word Media, who I've mentioned before, they not only have a lot of promotional programs to help people promote their books, but they also do a lot of research. And every year they do an annual survey of authors, and they have access to thousands of them. So to me, it's some of the most reliable information you can get. Last year, you may recall, they did a survey where they broke down all the authors polled by, how much money they were making, split it into 5 groups. So you could see, here's what the most successful authors are doing, and so forth. Well, this year, they've talked to independent authors, which could mean small press or publishing their own books, to figure out what practices and tactics are people using and what's working and what's not. And I see Jesse has already put up a link to the survey results. Those of you listening to this on the audio podcast, the link will be in the show notes, and I very much suggest that you check it out so you can find out for yourself. According to probably the most comprehensive poll of such things ever done, how much do indie authors write, for instance? And the answer turns out to be a whole lot. On the average of independent authors polled, the average was 16 books, and some have written more than 100. Almost all independent authors pay something for editing, and most are paying significant amounts. Most say Amazon provides, well, on average, 95% of their sales. To be fair, though, a lot of people are Amazon exclusive, so you average that into the mix and you're going to get a high number that may be higher than usual. But still, it's nice to know what other people are doing. And if you look at the numbers, you can kind of figure out what's working well for people and what isn't. So if you're indie published or thinking about it, check that out. Okay, enough news. Let's bring on 4 writers who cumulatively, and well, for that matter, individually, have many titles in print. Let's start the holiday jam. Betsey Kulakowski, Tamra Grantham, Kenneth Andrus, and John Wooley. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill. Nice to be here.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, John, when we were talking before, I was saying that I'll start with you because you haven't been on the podcast. And now it occurs to me that you have, because you spoke once when we were broadcasting live from WriterCon.
That's right. We did it in a hotel room, I think. Yeah.
Right. And somehow it worked. Thank Jesse, because he figures all this stuff. But I'm not going to shake up the mix now. I'm going to start with you. Our traditional first question, John. If you could give writers out there listening one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's one that I learned after we sold our first book in 1983. You're talking about milestones. It's 40
Right.
or 82. It's been 40 years since I sold my first book.
Oh, sure. I said 30, so you had to go 40. Fine.
Yeah, that's
Just so
right.
like you.
Yeah, another decade. And I didn't sell another book for 7 years. And came very close, had an agent, all of this. And at one point, about 3 a.m., one of those dark nights of the soul, I realized that it was an equation. And the equation is they either wear you down or you wear them down. And that's the advice that I would give to any writer. You either wear them down or they wear you down. And I would got determined not to be worn down.
Good for you. Well, I don't know if everybody listening knows what a musical geek I am, but of course we recently lost Stephen Sondheim.
Right.
Heartbreaking, though. He made it to 91, and of course everybody knows that great anthem, I'm Still Here, and that's exactly how I forget about it. Good times, bad times.
Right.
I've seen them all, but my dear, I'm still here. And that's really
Exactly
the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
All
That's
right,
the same
John,
thing.
tell us about the story you've got in Christmas Tapestry.
Well, Robert Brown and I wrote another story based on the epistolary 3 novels that we did for Babylon and Seventh Sense, Seventh Sense, Satan's Swine, and I'm trying to think of all the alliteration, and Sinister Serpent. And they tell the story of a guy named Robert. We decided to just go ahead and use our own names, Robert and John. He's writing back to his friend John, who is on the copy desk at the St. Paul Press in the 30s, telling him about his adventures. This continues those adventures. He has moved down from Arkansas, where he was working for the WPA, taking folklore. And runs a big nest of witches, and that's what happens in the books. And then he goes to Washington, and he has a seventh sense. He kind of is able to discern things. And because the war's coming on and all this sort of thing, he goes to Washington, and he starts working with the American government prior to Pearl Harbor. But in the story that we do called Gifts of the Magic, the story that's in the anthology and Christmas Tapestry is essentially a story of magic. It's horror and magic and the seventh sense all put together. Don't want to give away too much about it, but it involves a woman who may not be what she seems to be. Boy, how cliched is that?
Because that never happens in a horror story.
No, never happens in a horror story. They're always exactly who they seem to be, right? But yeah, so it was Robert and I did it the same way that we did before. We're sending letters back and forth and kind of fleshing it out that way.
And those books that you mentioned, the trilogy called the Cleansing Trilogy, those are if you like horror, if you like the 1930s, those are terrific books. You don't know this because I've never thought to tell you, but in my most recent, see how cleverly I'm working this plug for my book. In my most recent novel, Exposed, there's a part where Kinsey, kind of reading between the lines and trying to figure out what's going on behind somebody's eyeballs, refers to her seventh sense. And one of my editors reading it changed that to sixth sense. And I said, no, I know what I'm doing. This is a John Wooley reference. So.
Well, thank you for that homage. That's very nice.
It's an homage. Exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, Tamara, how about you?
Yeah.
You've been on the podcast before, but still, give us some writing advice. Put it this way, what's something that maybe you didn't know when you started? How many books have you got now?
21.
Right, including The Seventh Lie and Never Call Me Vampire.
Correct.
Also sort of a horror novel. It's got vampires in it. Did very well. There's a sequel to that. I'm not getting to my question, I know, but there's a sequel to that coming out next year, right?
Yes, I'm very excited about it. So, yes.
So John's written a vampire book too, but later. Anyway.
Sorry, John.
That's okay.
His is a televangelist. What was yours? Yours is anyway. So in the course of 21 books, what's something you've learned about writing along the way?
Bill, when you first asked that question, I was going to steal your advice because I usually do. And it's good advice. So why not, but you always have said, don't, when I took my first class from you, you challenged everyone in the class to keep writing and to write every day, which I still feel is really great advice. But I also want to add to that just a little bit, because I feel like after you write that first book and you just feel so excited and you feel so pumped about writing, and once you start getting into the writing world and sending your book out to agents and editors, and you start to get some kind of negative feedback, it happens to everybody.
Right.
And I feel like I've seen authors who have given up, who have just stopped writing because of the negative feedback, because maybe the sales weren't going how they wanted, or just maybe they got a bad review. So I feel like you have to be positive, and I feel like
Right.
you just can't give up, and you can't let those things play in your head to the point where you want to just give up. And so I feel like and I don't really know the best way to put it except don't give up. And I think that sounds easy when I say it, but then when you're actually faced with it, it's a different game. And so I think there are some tricks that you can do. I feel like it's really good to write down your positive accomplishments and to go back and reread those, or take a screenshot when your book was doing really well, number one, take a screenshot. I actually have a screenshot as the background on my computer when my book hit number one, and I see that every day that I open my computer and start to write.
Nice.
Yeah. And so it just reminds me, like, hey, you can do this, so I
That's
guess
fantastic.
that's
I try and start each day with a little bit of gratitude thinking, tracing through the day before and remembering good things, then for the day ahead, what I'm looking forward to. Because if you're like me, I'll remember every crummy thing that happened, every bad review will stick with me
Yes.
forever, but the good stuff
Mhm.
will
I know you
escape
tend
all
to
too
forget the
quickly.
good stuff. It's so funny
Right.
how that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, tell us about your story in Christmas Tapestry.
Okay. Well, this is a story I'm in love with because it is a book that I have wanted to write for so long. Years. I started outlining this book, but I never got the opportunity to write it. And just lately, probably over the summer, I just really started thinking about this book so much. And I had like 3 other projects that were due at the same time. And I'm like, well, I can't just stop writing my other projects and write this book. And it came, and then I got this idea. I was taking a walk with my 16-year-old son today, and I got this idea. I don't have to write the whole book. I could just write a short story prequel before the book and turn it into my submission for the Christmas anthology. And so the idea is I wanted to create a fantasy world where dragon riders are opposed to magic users. So there's kind of been this huge war that has happened between those two groups. And the magic users, their kingdom is kind of in ruins after this great war with the dragons. And so the dragon riders have the upper hand, and the magic users are just living in like the dungeons of this old castle that has been destroyed by the dragons. And in the book, it's called Of Serpents and Snow. And my main character, her name is Miara Wintersong, and her father has been attacked by a wyvern, which is like a dragon. And really the only way to save his life is to get the scale from a winter serpent. And so my main character kind of has to go on this quest. She goes, the first scene, the opening scene I had in my head, where she goes to this witch's cabin, and she kind of has to bargain with the witch to find a way to get the scale from the serpent to save her father. And so I really enjoyed writing it. It was a lot of fun. I did, however, I wrote it in the summertime, and it wasn't quite Christmassy enough. So, and
No snow.
my daughter suggested, Mom, just turn the AC up really high and turn on some Christmas music. So I did. I turned on some music, to try to get in the spirit of Christmas. So I went back when I was editing it and added some snow and some like
Fantastic.
Christmas time festival kind of stuff. So
If
that's
it's If it's snowing, it's Christmas, right?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Christmas.
Let me just say, while I'm thinking about it, I can see that some people are watching this as we stream live. Please feel free to type in messages or questions for this distinguished panel of writers, and we will make sure they answer them. The first comment that came in, we'd barely started the podcast, and here's something from one of your fans.
Oh, wow.
I
I'm
like
very
Tamra
flattered.
books.
Thank you.
Must have fans. Also, she's Team Dragon, apparently. So I think that's
Yes,
good.
I love dragons. Yeah.
Kenneth, how about you? You got some? What's your advice for writers?
Oh my goodness. Well, I was thinking about that when you're writing, and kind of tags onto the others, and it's basically to write for yourself, and not a specific audience. You know, you have to love writing to be able to get into this thing and really dive into it, and you know, with all the ups and downs, with the good times and the bads. But you really want to tell a story, and so if you have one to tell, then you work at it and you perfect your craft, and you keep on moving with it. I recall my first book, as I kind of evolved, it was more about the story arc. And as I write more and more books, it's getting more into the character's arc, you know, getting to my character's head, whether it be the protagonist or the antagonist. And that's been really an interesting journey that I've taken. And, you know, why, and like the one I'm working on now that I might probably come out in the spring, is I take my lead character, and why has he become what he is?
So tell us about your story in Christmas Tapestry. What's that?
Tapestry. Well, that's Nick Parkos, and that's my young analyst from the National Security Agency. And Nick is a pretty unassuming guy, and he sort of kind of falls into a lot of his misadventures. And
how can he be unassuming? He saved the world like 3 times or something at this point.
What wasn't his plan when he woke up?
Oh, okay.
So, but anyway, in this story, I grabbed the themes of my story, even from my experience when I was in the Navy or in the headlines. And so the Christmas novella is Nick is on the trail of another nefarious Chinese agent who's working with an American professor who's been turned by the Chinese. And he's doing gene modification to develop a super soldier. And so Nick and his group of the curators, his buddies that he's worked with all this time, are out doing this. And in this story, I include more of his wife, Michelle, and which is really sort of fun. He met Michelle years before in another operation in Paris when she was a character of Air Force One. And they just hit it off. And so we take this through.
I should say, for what everybody listening to this has already figured out, that if there's not some kind of story in this book that you like, then you must not read, because there's something for everybody in this one. All kinds of stories. The connection is Christmas, but beyond that, they crisscross every genre there is. I should also say this, Nick Parkos, he's the guy from your series books, the Defender series, right?
Correct.
And that's Flashpoint and Amber Dawn and stop me if I get this wrong, Arctic Menace, right?
So it's been quite an evolution. It's really kind of fun to get to know your characters, and they become part of your family. So when my series ends after book number 5, I'm not entirely, well, I've got an idea for what I'm going to do next, but it's going to be hard to say goodbye to these folks.
I can understand that. All right, Betsey Kulakowski. I don't know, did Jesse plan this? Because as I'm looking at this screen anyway, the Christmas framing puts a star right over your head, which I guess seems appropriate, because I know I was on Amazon, and this book that you wrote, I think it was your first book, called The Veritas Codex, had #1 flags all over it. You were a superstar on Amazon. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting. I opened up Amazon about midday, and it was #1 in every category, and then it was #1 on the movers and shakers list. It was 106 in Kindle overall. And I was gobsmacked. I'm like, how did this happen? Well, this is amazing. And, it's been out for over a year. So, I had given up hopes of it just taking off and running like it did. But at the end of the day, it was 104. It actually moved up. So I was really thrilled to see that and very happy. My website's been pinging right and left. I've got viewers from all over the world. So really excited about that.
That's fantastic. And we're just hoping all those people then, segue and pick up Christmas Tapestry, because now they need something for Christmas, right?
Absolutely.
So Veritas Codex was first.
Yes.
And then the Jaguar Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Alien Accord.
Yes.
And there's something coming out next year. What's that?
Yes. Book 4 will be the Monk's Grimoire.
All right. Tell us about your Christmas story.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of falls right at the end of book 3. So kind of in the timeline of the Veritas Codex world. Lauren Grayson is a scientific-minded investigator, does paranormal research for her television show, the Veritas Codex. And she and her team are set out on the hunt for the Christmas devil Krampus in Germany. So they have to go and find the Christmas devil.
Yeah, seems perfect. And these people are your characters from the Veritas books, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So the Veritas Codex follows them on their adventures on their TV show. In the first book, they start out on the hunt for Bigfoot. And in the middle of the investigation, Lauren disappears and she's gone for 10 days. And when she returns, she has no idea where she's been or what's happened to her. But all the evidence points to the fact that she was abducted by Bigfoot. So was it Bigfoot? Was it aliens? Pity she can't remember.
That's fantastic. All right, I'm looking at the stream. And of course, what I like best is that someone on Facebook has said, "Looking good, everyone." Probably not talking about me. Also saying they started the Veritas Codex last night and loving it. So they must be one of the people who put you in that number 1 slot.
Yay, thank
We need
you.
to be nice to them. Here's somebody else, James Murphy. I recently read the Veritas Codex, loved it. Looking forward to reading the next ones in the series.
Terrific.
Lots of interest in Krampus. All right, here's a question, and I'm just going to throw this out. It'll be like Jeopardy. Whoever rings in first, it's yours. Any tips for someone who has bits of a story but can't seem to put it together? The characters, plots, and situations are there, but I'm not sure how to make it flow. Anybody got any suggestions?
Sure. Just outline it. Outline it. You don't have to go by the outline, but outline it.
So, and how do you do that? Easy to say, but what do you actually do, John?
Well, if you've got all of that stuff together, it's kind of like Ron Wolf and I wrote Old Fears. We just sat down, you have all these incidents and you put them all together. And then, although Ron used to say that I wrote the sex and he wrote the violence, that wasn't really true. But you put all these incidents and everything together, and then you write from the beginning to the end. There's really only 2 ways to write a book. You can either write it from an outline, either a tight outline or a loose outline, or you can do it as a kind of, and take a character and just see where the character goes. And I have never been able to do it the latter way. I've studied with people who have, but I've never been able to do it. I find that outlining something is the best way, and that stuff just seems to fall into place if you write an outline.
Tamara, what were you going to say? I saw you start a dancer.
I was gonna put in a plug for your book, Story Structure.
I knew I was calling on you for a reason.
There you go.
No, that one actually, I go back over that book every time I write a new novel, because I feel like it really, it's kind of a cheat sheet on how, which is kind of I guess a bad way to put it, but it's a really easy way of figuring out what needs to go where in your book, especially with like your first opening scene and where your plot point 1 needs to be and what to do in your midpoint. And I just feel like it's a really great way to just put a whole book together, especially when you have all those little bits and pieces and you're not right, really sure where they all fit. Mm-hmm. And I think that, it's a pretty short book. It's not really long. It's not too detailed. It's straight to the point. And it's even got some graphics in there that help you figure things out. So
Thank you, Ralph. He's my
Yeah.
graphics master. I think he did those when he was like 13. Kenneth,
Yeah.
you're about to say something?
I recall one of the things that one of your other podcast guests, Bill Martin, says. He says, "Don't start your book until you know how it ends," and that kind of goes in with the outlining part. And my books are really have really complicated parts. So if I didn't sit down and outline, I would just my plot points would get lost. I wouldn't close the loose ends, and so you start with your ideas. I mean, I started on some of these thinking about what was going to be on it years in advance before I set pen or actually fingers to the keyboard, and oftentimes it just starts falling into place.
Right. What we're dancing around, of course, is that old, are you the plotter or the pantser, writing from the seat of your pants. Anybody who's read story structure knows I'm a plotter, although I've done both, but really only pantsed because I didn't know any better, and soon found that plotting led to a better book written in less time. How about you, Betsey? Which are you?
I feel like I'm the lone pantser here.
Oh, there you go.
I have to confess, though, I have become kind of a planter, kind of a hybrid. I used to just sit and write,
Planter.
and I believe in sitting down at the keyboard and just putting your fingers on the keys and just letting it bleed out. I do now tend to start with a premise or a theme. I try to focus on the why. Why are we doing this? Why is this happening? Why are we here? What do we want? What's the character's need? What are their needs? And then I figure out the how. So for me, that's been very successful. And of course, I write really fast, so I spend a lot more time editing than I do writing.
Did you say you're a prancer? A plancer? Because prancer would be very seasonal, I think.
Well, it would
That would be, you should have gone that way.
I missed a joke.
Betsey, while I'm talking to you, I asked Tamra the question about what have you learned along the way? And since you are basking in the glow of those fantastic #1 flags, what have you learned along the way in the course of 4 books?
How much time do we have?
Pick one.
Oh gosh, I have learned so much. I think the biggest thing for me is that fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. And I was a fearful writer. I started the Veritas Codex series in 2009, thinking that no one would ever read it. I could be as outlandish as I wanted it to be. And it was fine because I was not going to ever let anybody read it. And honestly, when it came time, I pitched it on the WriterCon cruise. And when I'm trying to decide which one to send, I thought, well, send the one that scares you the most. And that was the first time I ever let my fear out of the way. And I just kind of pushed it aside and said, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. And here's where we are.
Yeah, fantastic. Fear worked out. Of course, fear was essential to your first book too, wasn't it, John? Which is now celebrating a 40th anniversary.
The 40th anniversary edition, I know, just came out, and I'm very excited about it. Yeah, the book won't die, and it's now, as you know, it's now in active development, whatever that means, with Sony Pictures Television. So we'll see what happens. But it's so old. It's so old that the person who optioned it the first time in '84, her daughter has an option for Sony Pictures. That's how long that book has been around.
That family loves your book.
That's right. That's right.
They could just put the deal together. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Ken, what's your writing process look like? Do you get up in the morning and sit down and type for a certain number of hours or pages, or how do you do it?
Yeah, I actually do. The first thing I do is I hit the kind of news feeds to make sure California hadn't broken off into the ocean or something. But and then I kind of go through and I get a news feed from the Navy Information Office, and I look through that to see if anything's going on in the world that kind of impacts what I'm writing about. And then I sit down and just and do my best after feeding the cat and doing that kind of things to spend X number of hours. Now, what I call my activities of daily living, ADLs, as doctor types would call it, if they don't get in the way. But I like to spend it just varies. And some days, it just flows and I can just sit there and just type away and be happy about it. And other days it's like, and you read this, the old writer's block. And so if that happens, I go off and I just do something else. I go work
Mhm.
on, because out here in Hawaii, I'm putting my new herbs and vegetables in, and
Wow.
and then I exercise, and so that's usually around noon or something like that. Before it gets too late in the afternoon, I talk myself out of it. But I got a pretty, being a compulsive me, I got a pretty set routine that I use to keep the old brain active.
Hmm. I used to do something like that too, but I read somewhere that if you wanted to be an artist, you had to make sacrifices. So I gave up exercise. What about the rest of you guys? What's your writing process look like?
Well, I'll tell you the other advice I could give. And Bill, we've talked about this before. When I used to know everything there was to know about writing novels after my first few novels. Now, I've written a few dozen books, and I know nothing except what I just told you, which is you wear them now, they wear you down. And the only other thing I can ever tell people really is find a place, sit down in that place every day. You can take the weekend off if you want, at the same time. And there was an old songwriter named Cliffy Stone who said, even if you're staring at a blank piece of paper or a blank screen, you are in the process. I've always liked that term, in the process. And you have to get in the process every day at the same time in the same place if you can.
Betsey, I know you're juggling writing with a very serious career as a safety professional. What's your process look like?
I do a lot of my writings on evenings and weekends. I'm up at 5:30. I'm to the office by 7:30. I work until 5, so I don't get home till about 5:30. Dinner for the family and maybe some exercise when weather permits, or sometimes I jump on my exercise bike downstairs. And then when I'm ready to kind of slow down, usually by 6 or 7 o'clock, I'll sit down with the laptop. Of course, I'm now in my new Veritas Codex HQ. I just recently renovated our old guest room and now have my own writing office. So I tend to come here first if nobody bothers me, and I'll just sit down and write until the eyelids get heavy and I get sleepy and it's time to go to bed. But on the weekends is when I do sprints, and I will get up Saturday mornings usually pretty early, take care of things that need to be done if something has to be done right away. Otherwise, I'll come in here straight away, get a cup of coffee, and I'll just sit and write until the rest of the house wakes up, which might be noon or 1 o'clock because I have teenagers. And then weekends, I typically have a friend that I meet for coffee that's a fellow writer, and we'll take turns reading our current works in progress back and forth to each other, just kind of hear it out loud, listen for, tempo beats and typos and things like that. Drink a lot of coffee. And then I'll come in Sunday night and spend a couple more hours fixing what I found during the day. And so I just do a lot of sprinting on the weekends when time permits. I'll take my laptop anywhere. I've taken my iPad to the football game. Anywhere I'm sitting still in the car or wherever, I'm usually writing, or at least thinking about writing.
Sure. And Tamara, I know you've got 5 children. That's a different kind of safety professional. How do you find any time to write? What's your process?
It's gotten a little more complicated over the years, just because with kids, I don't know, just our lifestyle changes, and so my writing schedule has to be flexible and change with it. But I've always had a goal since I started writing 11 years ago to write 1,000 words a day. So I don't know why, but that motivates me, and that's just a goal that it makes it easier when I open up the computer, and if I know that I have that goal to get those words written, then it makes it easier for me to do. It's not always easy, especially now that I'm homeschooling my 6-year-old. So, but I write better in the morning. So I always try, if I can wake up a little bit before the kids, I'll try to get some writing in at that time. And then after I'm done with school with my 6-year-old, I'll try to get some writing done before the older kids get home. So that's for me, that's how I work. I don't usually write too much in the evening. Sometimes I'll go back and edit what I wrote earlier in the day, or I'll work on some marketing or something like that. But my brain tends to shut down in the evening. So whatever I write at that time isn't always very good. But
I'm intrigued by this 1,000 words. Is that, I mean, that sounds like something I would tell myself, and I think, oh, I've got so many things I need to do, but I should write. I'll just knock out 1,000 words. And of course, I end up doing 3 times that and staying all till the afternoon. I just have to convince myself to not do other stuff and start. Is it like that for you?
Yes, because when I know that I have those 1,000 words, it kind of hangs over my head, and so I want to get it done early
Right.
before I have to get other things done. And so it just works for me. And it's funny because I talk to other writers who have totally different, like Betsey was saying, she writes better in the evenings and the weekend. And so I think it's funny how every writer is so different in their writing style. And I feel like writers just have to find what works best for them. And that's what works for me. So that's what I do.
That's right. Let's talk about characters I won't bother with the one about where do you get your story ideas. I usually say Cleveland or something like that. But where do your characters come from? All of you are writing or have written series books that involve some kind of series character. John, I'm giving you the benefit of that. We're going to call the Cleansing Trilogy. I mean, it's 3 books, kind of in the sense that the Lord of the Rings is 3 books. It's one big story. But anyway, you've all done series characters, so and that I think requires some special skill and thought, because you need somebody who's tooled to sustain many books, and your reader can't get sick of them, and you can't get sick of them. Or you might as well just forget it, right? So what are the secrets? What have you what kind of tricks have you used when you're creating characters? Tips for the audience. Betsey, how about you?
So when I started writing the Veritas Codex series, I wanted a very strong female protagonist. That was really the only goal when I started, because there just aren't a lot in the thriller genre. There just weren't a lot of female protagonists. So I started with Lauren. She was the first character that kind of came forward to me. She was strong, sassy, stubborn to a fault. I've had readers say, I didn't like her at first, because then I realized I was her. So that was kind of a great critique to get back. But she is Native American. She's Cherokee. We have some Cherokee heritage in our family. And, back in the day, it wasn't cool to be Native American, and somebody lied to get off the tribal rolls. And so I wanted her to be very proud of her heritage, and I wanted that to kind of play into the plot and to really be a part of who she is. So that's where Lauren came from. She's in her mid-30s. I wanted somebody that was just a little bit older. I didn't want the teenage. I wanted a mature woman who could hold her own and bite the head off of a fish and do whatever she had to do to go out on the hunt for Bigfoot. So that's where I started with Lauren, and I have gotten to know her pretty well over the years, because, like I said, that was 2009 when I started writing that. So I've actually written. I keep losing track. I can't remember if it's 12 or 13 books in the series are already drafted, and I'm working on another one right now. So
those
I know
need to come out faster, I guess.
I know. If my darn job would get out of the way, but I love my job, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Wow.
But I've gotten to know her really well. I know all her faults. I know her fears. There's a lot of things that haven't really come forward yet that will over the course of the book. But we get to see Lauren and Rowan and their life together throughout their whole lifetime. This is going to be a long-term relationship. There's a long series there, and so we're going to get to see them in all seasons.
I see someone on Facebook is saying that they love your idea of getting together with someone and reading out loud.
Yeah, I was really lucky. My college professor, we discovered that we were both writers. The first class I ever took from him, and that was probably 10, 15 years ago, because I knew him before he was my professor. So we it's kind of a priority for us. We make time to have that Sunday afternoon sit down and just kind of have committed to that. And I've been with some other critique groups where we did that, but everybody's schedule gets so complicated. But when it's just one-on-one like that, and you make it a priority, you don't pass up on the things that add value to what you do. So it works for him, it works for me, and my family, it works for them too. So we make it work.
Ken, am I right? And my memory is not flawless, but Nick Parkos wasn't really the main guy in the first book in this series, but he has become so since. Am I right about that?
Right, correct. In the the first book again was I pulled a lot out of my experience when I was in active duty, with the Navy, and back then the goal was, I say, more the story of just trying to let people know what's going on behind the scenes and never make the headlines or the 30-second soundbite on the news. What really came into these decisions and things. And then as I evolved, I said, well, you need to explain your characters and how they do that. And the other thing I did is I really don't want to make any kind of political statements because I've always been warned not to do that. I make your novels a manifesto because that's just
Good advice. Yeah.
But in my time in the Navy, I remember some things that just weren't correct. I remember my wife's a retired Navy medical officer too, and when she got out of the Navy, she was just amazed at how she was treated. I mean, not well. And so I said, that's interesting. So that got me thinking. And so I said, well, I need to kind of tell some other stories about folks who've been in the military. So one of my new characters, Jeff Lang, who's head of the curators, he's an ex-SEAL, but he's also gay. And that was just really fun to do. So my ballroom dance instructor, I've known for like 12 years now. And so he started feeding me lines and said, and then he dragged me downtown to one of the gay bars. I'm saying, well, that's interesting because that wasn't exactly my life experience, but that was really fun doing that. And then of course with my wife and the other women in the military, so Arctic Menace, I wanted to make one of the initial characters. I made her the helicopter pilot, the Coast Guard. And so it's just, so you take your characters and you just draw from everything. Some of this stuff, of course, is autobiographical because you can't help but put in your own life, personal experience into the books. But it's just kind of fun developing characters, and especially amongst the antagonists. Get into the bad guy's head. Why do they do what they do? And you can't make the bad guy totally bad. You have to have some empathetic parts to your nasty guys. The reader saying, well, maybe he's not so bad after all.
Right, absolutely. Reasonably motivated. John, Tamara, what about you guys? Where are your characters coming from?
Well, I always like characters whose reach kind of exceeds their grasp. There's something just fascinating can be about people who are trying to do things, and you'll see it in the books that I do on my own. People who are struggling to do something and just can't quite get there. To me, that's fascinating because it's all about the human condition. Now, with the story that we did in Christmas Tapestry, Robert and I, as well as with the Cleansing trilogy, it started because, and I think, Bill, you know this story, Robert, one day, I'd known Robert since the 60s. We were fans of old horror movies and 30s stuff and music, and he started sending me these letters that were written on authentic World War II vintage or 30s vintage stationery, airmail stationery, and telling me stories about being in working for the WPA in Dayton in 1939. Well, it took me 3 or 4 weeks to realize this was Robert's way, because Robert has an interesting angle of vision, and this was Robert's way of saying he wanted to collaborate on a book with me. So that's...
At first, you just thought he was crazy or something.
Well, we knew each other since the 60s. We did this kind of stuff all the time.
Oh, okay.
And so what ends up as we go into the book, it's not about us, the characters of Robert is writing to John, because all the books are epistolary, but it's not us, but it is based on our friendship, a friendship that goes back to 1965. And so sometimes, real life, just like Kenneth was saying, real life, there's a lot of it. As a matter of fact, Kenneth, I was in the Navy too. And my first book, which God knows I hope nobody ever sees, the protagonist was named after one of my shipmates.
Tamara, somebody watching us on Facebook is asking, is there a particular kind of character that's easiest to write for you?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it stems from my love of reading. And I love to read characters who are like authentic and relatable and not anyone too perfect. I like for my characters to kind of have relatable flaws and like have to deal with everyday life, but with a paranormal magical twist thrown into their life. So their lives are a little more interesting than mine. But I definitely, with my characters, I like to make them not the stereotype. Like, so sometimes, like with my vampire book, I really wanted to mislead readers, to think that my character, my vampire, is, like the stereotypical vampire when he's not. And I wanted to give him I wanted to make him feel human and have relatable emotions. And then another example is my Fairy World MD series. This was kind of funny how I came up with this character, because this was back in 2010 or 2011. I was with a writing group at a library, and not a library, a bookstore. I think it was a Hastings bookstore. So that's how long ago that was. But we were having a writing group there, and this woman walked upstairs. She had a very slight frame. She had red hair, and it was kind of cut in a pixie cut. And she walked just kind of very primly. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be cool if she was an elf? Because she kind of reminded me of like a pixie elf kind of person. And that got me started about my character for my 7 books Fairy World MD series. And in that series, she's half elf. Her mother is human, and her father is an elf from a world called Faithander. So that's where that character, I just happened to see somebody at a bookstore, and that's where that character got started. So you never know with writers, like where they're going to pick up their inspiration. So you have to be really careful around writers, because you might end up in a book. In that case, it ended up being a good thing, but you never know.
Non-actionable. Okay. Nobody's actually asking this, but I know deep down what everybody listening really wants to know is, what do writers do during the holidays? Christmas, or whichever one is your holiday of choice. So any special writer things, habits? Of course, Tamara's taking notes on people for future books, but
Yeah.
What about the rest of you?
Since I work full time, the holidays is writing time. I will do a big sprint over the holiday weekend. The book 4 that's coming out after the first of the year, I actually wrote that over a holiday weekend. I wrote 25,000 words over a 3-day weekend.
Wow.
So that book was very quick write. Of course, it's been through a year's worth of edits, but writing is my holiday. I take care of the family. We do the family thing. I cook. My kids love my cooking, and I love to bake and make homemade rolls, and all the fun things that you have at the holidays, all the treats. And then it's writing time after the kids go to play with their toys or go hang out with their friends. That's quiet time for Mama to write.
Sure. What about the rest of you, Ken?
Yeah. My writing hours kind of cut back a little bit, but then one of the things I always make sure I do is make sure I give myself some what I call mental recess. And so, I want to make sure I take time to make sure I can kind of recalibrate my attitude if it's kind of going off track a little bit, and give myself free motive. But for me, the holidays, I try to spend a little more time with the family. We go up to my youngest daughter's house on Thanksgiving for about 2 weeks for the clan get together, the Thanksgiving extravaganza, we call it. And so it's just, but not, so I just take some time for recess.
That's fine. John, Tamara, rest of you?
Well, it's like, I go along with Ken. It's like taking some mental health days. You just need to do that every once in a while. And honestly, I know this sounds awful, but I write for a living. And so I try to get away from writing on the holidays for a few days. It just a complete opposite of Betsey. Holidays for me, it's like occasionally you really do have to get away from it for a few days, because you're just right there putting it all out there every morning or every day or whenever you write. And sometimes you just have to step back and recharge. And I'm with Kenneth on that.
Tamara, down to you.
I'm kind of the same way, just because I have younger kids right now. And so I really want to enjoy the holidays with them. And I don't want it to be all about, at this stage in my life, I want to be able to enjoy Christmas with them. But I feel like as things change, that'll change too. But right now, I just really, even though my kids ask me what I want for Christmas, and I tell them I want a quiet room so I can go and write. I've never gotten it, but that's what they don't understand at all. They're like, Mom, you can't wrap that up and open it or play with it. That doesn't make any sense to us. So,
Yeah.
but for a while, after I first started writing, I have to put a plug in there for my husband, because every Christmas he would buy me like a big stack of books on writing. And so at first I was like, what? Why? Do you think I'm not a good writer? Why are you getting me all these books? And then I started reading them and I was like, oh, that's what I was doing wrong. So anyway, so I have a very nice collection. I have a very nice collection of writing books, thanks to my husband. He doesn't get me those books anymore, so maybe that means
You got it down now.
Yeah.
Whereas I write every day, including Christmas. But honestly, it's not. It's mostly just guilt. It's, do I want to enjoy the day because I wrote a little bit, or do I want to feel like I should be writing all day? So I get up early
Bill,
and do it.
Bill, let me ask you a question on that. If I can turn the tables here, how
What?
much do you read?
I read every day too, but I don't know how to measure how much. Only difference is I usually write in the morning and I read in the evening.
I'm the same. Yeah.
Did I say that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I do that same.
And I'm the same way. I had a writing teacher that said, if you only, Marilyn Harris, when I got out of the service and went back to graduate school at Central State, Marilyn Harris was the artist in residence there. She said, if you only had an hour a day to write, spend half of it reading, half of it writing. And a lot of people, I really think, try to write without reading.
Yeah.
Oh my. Yeah.
I've seen it. I've met them at conferences and whatnot.
Sure.
I'd really like to be a writer, but I hate to read. What do you recommend? I recommend
Another job.
accounting. Yeah. Or something. Right. All right. We probably should wrap this up, fun as it is. But one last question. Tell me what's next. What's in your future? I think some of you have mentioned it, but anyway, what's next, Ken?
Well, after I finish this series, I've got 1.5 books of this and go. I want to write a historical novel about my family that came over in 1635, and he was a founding father of the revolution. So I want to do a first book on him and then his follow up on his wife. Kind of give his and her perspective. I've always been interested in, like, why did he do what he did back then?
Great idea, Betsy.
I'm still working on the Veritas Codex series. I don't know that there'll ever be an end to that, but I do have some other things that I've written that I would love to give some attention to and maybe self-publish or get out there in some way. I've got some women's fiction, some science fiction. So, eventually I'm going to hope to retire and be able to devote it full time. So.
A few more days like yesterday, you might be there. Isn't Lauren eventually going to run out of unsolved mysteries, though? I mean,
she might run out of it, but who knows what'll happen with some of the other characters, because we've got some great back characters that could end up having their own series.
Okay, Tamara, what's next?
Well, I've actually spent the last 3 weeks working on outlining. So, and I've got a lot of irons in the fire. I'll just give you a heads up on that one. But what I'm going to write next is called Of Dragons and Druids, and it's going to be the first book of my Warrior Kingdom series, which is the book. The prequel is Of Serpents and Snow, which is in the Christmas Tapestry. And then I've also got 2 sequels that I'm going to write. One is for my middle grade novel called The Not So Chosen One. So hopefully I'll get that one written quickly. And then the next one is for a series called Harley Sinclair, which is a female Indiana Jones character with magic. So, and I've already gotten the first book written in that one. And I'm hoping to write the sequel for that one too. So I have a lot on my plate, but it's a good problem to have because I love to write.
Absolutely. And John, what about you?
Well, I got a couple of those big old work for hire projects that I'm finishing up. And, this month we had the Billy Parker autobiography, Thanks a Lot, come out, as well as the 40th anniversary of Old Fears and Christmas Tapestry. And the next actual thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be writing the script for the 7th season of my little public television TV show, Film Noir Theater. So I'll be producing and hosting and writing that, and we'll be shooting that in January.
Any thoughts about retiring? I mean, there's a rumor you've been doing this for 40 years or more. So.
That's more than a rumor.
but not retiring, I guess.
No, sir. No, I don't know why. I have a lot of people. I live in the town where I grew up, and a lot of my classmates are saying, when are you going to retire and enjoy life? And because we're in our 70s. And I said, well, I don't ever going to retire, but I'm enjoying life right now.
Right. Perfect
So
answer.
there you go. Yeah. Sure.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me for the Holiday Jam. I bet we'll see all of you on again, but thanks and Merry Christmas.
Hey,
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
All right, then. Hey, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this earlier, but just in case I forgot, let me mention that I've got a new book out that's Exposed, the second book in the new legal thriller series featuring Kinsey Rivera, who is also appearing in my short story, cleverly titled Yuletide Splitsville. In this book, we've all been talking about Christmas Tapestry. I have a site on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Wilburn, where you can, if you're so inclined, support this ad-free podcast, which we would really appreciate. Please rate or review the show wherever you watch it, live stream it, or listen to it, download it as a podcast. Those ratings and reviews make it much easier for other listeners to find us and find out about the podcast. All right. Hey, Merry Christmas, everybody. And until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.